Today, we're looking at 1980s fantasy, from classic sword and sorcery to more dreamlike films, including one strange little-known gem from the end of the decade. 8 films in total, all worth checking out. I tried not to repeat titles from my previous lists, but as always, feel free to add anything you think belongs here in the comments. Hawk the Slayer came out at the very start of the early 1980s sword and sorcery boom, just before the genre peaked with films like Excalibur and Conan the Barbarian. In many ways, it feels like an early attempt to define what 80s fantasy cinema would become. The low budget is obvious. Most scenes are shot outdoors, with no real towns or cities, and the effects feel closer to late 1970s television, relying on flashing lights, simple animation, and colorful visual tricks. The story is straightforward and episodic. Hawk faces his masked brother Voltan after a dispute over power within their family. He sets out to stop him and is joined along the way by a small fantasy group, an elf, a dwarf, and a giant, at a time when these archetypes were still new to fantasy films. Despite the rough edges, there's a clear sense that the cast and crew were having fun, and that energy is part of why Hawk the Slayer is worth watching. Clash of the Titans follows Perseus, the favored son of Zeus, who becomes caught in a feud between the gods. Zeus aids him, while the sea goddess Thetis works against him after Perseus angers her. Things escalate when Perseus falls in love with Princess Andromeda, who was once promised to Thetis's son, Calibos. From there, he's pushed from one dangerous quest to the next, with the gods pulling the strings and mortals paying the price. The film is well produced, with lush scenery, solid acting, and standout special effects that give it a classic epic feel. It was the final movie to feature stop-motion work by Ray Harryhausen, whose creatures remain one of its defining elements. The mechanical owl, Bubo, is especially memorable, and is often said to echo the popularity of R2-D2. Clash of the Titans was a box office success, and has remained popular with fantasy and sword and sorcery fans. A 2010 remake followed, though it's generally seen as unnecessary, and not one I'd recommend. The Beastmaster was released shortly after Conan the Barbarian, and follows the same general template, with big-looking visuals achieved on a relatively small budget. The story centers on Dar, a warrior with the ability to communicate with animals. That trait is spelled out right in the title and serves as the film's main hook. On set, this meant working with a range of animals, including ferrets, birds, and a black panther that was actually a more cooperative tiger painted black. The film performed modestly at the box office, but still spawned 2 sequels, which faded just as quickly as the original. Deathstalker follows a warrior named Deathstalker. A witch tells him he must find and unite 3 powerful objects, a sword, a chalice, and an amulet, before they can be claimed by the evil magician Munkar. He secures the sword and enters a tournament meant to determine the strongest fighter. In reality, the contest is a trap set by Munkar to eliminate his rivals. To succeed, Deathstalker must survive the tournament, rescue a princess, and stop the magician. Among sword and sorcery ripoffs, this one is often seen as one of the better examples, with solid production value for the budget and stronger than average acting. It also introduced Lana Clarkson, which brings us neatly to Barbarian Queen. Barbarian Queen follows Queen Amathea, whose village is destroyed by the forces of Lord Erakur. Many of the villagers, including her sister, are taken captive. Amathea survives alongside her handmaiden Estrild and the warrior Tiniara, and the 3 set out on a rescue mission. The film's reputation is largely tied to its heavy emphasis on violence and nudity. leaning fully into exploitation rather than traditional fantasy storytelling. It mixes broad humor with constant action and excess, openly embracing the grindhouse side of sword and sorcery cinema. What more could you ask for? Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity is one of those films where everything is turned up just enough to tip over into camp. It's cheesy, shameless, and fully aware of what it's doing. The setup is simple. Two women escape from a space prison and end up stranded on a remote planet. The problem is that the planet belongs to a man named Zed, who's essentially running his own version of the most dangerous game, complete with robots to help him hunt his guests. From there, the movie leans hard into its limitations. The budget is tiny, the dialogue is rough, the robots look barely functional, and the sets do very little to hide how cheap everything is. Whether that's a deal breaker or the main appeal depends entirely on your taste. Paperhouse tells the story of a young girl who discovers that her drawings come to life inside a strange inner world. When she draws a boy named Mark, he appears in her visions and is later revealed to be a real, sick child. When she sketches her father as angry and crosses his face out, he returns as something far more threatening. The tone quickly turns darker. This imagined world feels convincing, and that sense of reality makes everything increasingly unsettling as the film goes on. Directed by Bernard Rose, who later made Candyman, Paperhouse sits somewhere between fantasy and nightmare. If you're drawn to dreamlike, psychological fantasy with a darker edge, this one is well worth seeking out. The Wizard of Speed and Time is a true one-man project. Written, directed, animated, and starring Mike Jitloff, it expands on a 1979 short and turns into a fast-moving mix of visual gags, homemade effects, and low-budget Hollywood satire. The story follows Jitloff as a struggling independent filmmaker trying to get a project made in Hollywood. He's given a chance to deliver something usable, while a cynical producer openly bets that he won't be able to pull it off. And he's also trying to win over the woman of his dreams. Even with all the DIY chaos, this is a surprisingly whimsical and wholesome movie. You get absurd humor, playful sketches, and homemade effects that feel like pure enthusiasm on screen. The film never really had a wide official release, but it's currently available on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description, and if you enjoy this kind of weird fantasy, this one is very much for you.